A poor girl knocks at the door of a mansion and says, "Sir, I haven't eaten in 2 days. Could you please give me some bread?" The young billionaire, who is mourning the loss of his daughter, opens the door and freezes when he sees that the girl looks identical to his child. What happens next will make you cry. Nathan Wells woke up at 6 in the morning, as always. He didn't even need the alarm clock. For 365 days, his body had been pulling him out of sleep at the same time, as though carrying out a sentence. His feet touched the cold floor beside the bed, and for a second he remained seated, eyes closed. This was the cruelest moment of his day. The first 5 seconds of awareness, when he still didn't remember, when he could still believe that Sophie was sleeping in the next room. The calendar on the wall displayed the date in red. 1 year. Nathan went to the bathroom without turning on the lights. He knew every inch of the house by heart, every obstacle, every door. Even so, the darkness didn't stop him from seeing the ghosts. The rubber duck still in the tub, the small toothbrush in the holder, kept like a relic. Water on the face. Mirror. The dark circles under his eyes had become a permanent part of his face, like tattoos he never wanted. Black coffee, no sugar. A piece of toast he wouldn't eat. While the coffee maker worked, Nathan walked down the hallway, avoiding looking at the photos on the wall. He stopped at the closed door, the only one in the house he treated as something sacred. His fingers touched the cold doorknob, but didn't turn it. Not today. Since Sophie had gone, the house had become far too big. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a spacious living room, a large kitchen, and a backyard garden. No one tended anymore. Everything was empty. A museum of memories where only a solitary visitor still wandered. In the living room, the toys were arranged exactly as on the last day. A doll on the couch staring at nothing. A castle made of colorful blocks on the coffee table. Children's storybooks neatly stacked. Nathan wouldn't let the housekeeper touch any of it. Sometimes he would sit on the floor and pick up a toy just to feel its weight in his hand. People told him he should pack it all away. Clean. Start over. As if grief had an instruction manual. The phone rang. Nathan looked at it disinterestedly, letting the answering machine take the message. "Nathan, it's Janet. Just reminding you about dinner tonight. We're all waiting for you. It's been way too long, dear. You can't go on like this." He turned off the sound before the voice could finish. Janet, his older sister, led the army of well-intentioned people determined to save him, as if he wanted to be saved. The coffee overflowed, burning his fingers. Nathan didn't even react to the pain. He pulled back the heavy curtains and let the dim morning light flood the room. The day was cloudy, as though the sky itself respected the date. In the window's reflection, he saw the entire living room, the toys, the photos on the walls, the space where Sophie used to dance, the 2 video game controllers still side by side. He grabbed his work folder, architectural projects he completed on autopilot. His boss kept him on out of pity. Everyone knew it. Nathan Wells, the brilliant architect who now drew soulless buildings, symmetrical, functional, empty, like his life. He checked the clock. It was only 6:40. The day would be long. In the entry hall, he stopped to put on his shoes. A slight noise caught his attention. He turned, heart racing for no reason. The sound didn't repeat, but for one absurd instant, he expected to see Sophie coming down the stairs in her unicorn pajamas, hair a mess, asking for pancakes. "Stop it," he told himself. At the front door, 3 locks. Nathan had installed them after she was gone, as if he could lock the pain out, as if he could keep more precious things from slipping away. He stepped out into the empty street. The quiet neighborhood was still asleep, houses well kept with their perfect gardens, whole families sleeping under the same roof, parents and children, hugs, shared nightmares, noisy breakfasts, life. He unlocked the car and tossed his folder on the passenger seat. He didn't start the engine right away. He just stared at the house, big, imposing, silent, a box full of nothing. When Sophie was alive, Nathan hated noise. Children's TV shows with repetitive songs, the click-clack of princess shoes on the wooden floor, loud laughter, endless questions about stars, dinosaurs, and why the sky is blue. Now he'd give anything to hear that chaos again, just once. The silence had become an invader. It occupied every corner, grew when no one was looking, suffocating slowly. The silence had weight, shape, presence. It was more real than anything in Nathan's life. In the car, he turned on the radio. Anything was better than his own thoughts. The announcer warned of a storm coming late in the day. Ready for changing weather. Strong winds tonight. Nathan gave a humorless smile. For a year, he had been living in the same storm, the same day, the same frozen minute. The difference was that no one else saw the rain drenching him. He started the car but didn't drive to the office. Not today. His boss would understand. The cemetery was 20 minutes away. Nathan knew the route by heart. He could have done it with his eyes closed. He bought flowers from the usual spot. The florist always set aside sunflowers on Fridays, knowing who bought them and for whom. As he drove, the silence in the back seat haunted him. Where there should have been a booster seat, conversation about school, pleas for made-up stories during traffic. The house is empty without you, Sophie, he muttered to no one. The storm arrived earlier than predicted. Large drops battered the windshield as Nathan parked at the cemetery. He grabbed the flowers and stepped out without an umbrella. He didn't mind getting wet. Little did he know that this storm would bring more than water. It would bring a knock at the door. A second chance. A girl soaked by the rain, with eyes he would recognize anywhere. But for now, all Nathan knew was the weight of silence, a silence that screamed louder than any sound in that big, empty house. Nathan returned from the cemetery drenched. The rain had turned into a furious storm, sweeping through the streets and forcing cars to slow down while pedestrians ran for cover. He parked in the garage but didn't get out of the car right away. He sat there, watching the water stream down the windshield, blurring everything outside. As always, visiting Sophie's grave left him exhausted. It wasn't just the emotional weight of the memories, but also the effort to maintain composure, to not completely break down in the middle of the cemetery. He had learned to save his collapse for inside the house, where no one would see him. When he finally went in, he dropped the keys on the entry table and took off his soaked coat. His shoes squeaked against the wooden floor, leaving wet footprints down the hallway. He loosened his tie and headed to the kitchen to grab a towel to dry his hair. The clock read 4 in the afternoon. Nathan hadn't eaten anything all day, but his stomach wasn't complaining. Appetite was one of the many things that had died with Sophie. He ate because he had to, not because he wanted to. Bread, fruit, anything that required little effort. As he dried his hair, he wandered through the house with empty eyes. Some mail was piled on the living room table, probably bills. He ignored them. The TV had been off for so long, Nathan wondered if it still worked. Silence was his only constant companion. His cell phone vibrated in his pocket. A text from his sister. "Dinner at 7, we'll pick you up. I won't take no for an answer today." Nathan sighed. The anniversary of his daughter's death, and he still had to endure a dinner full of pitying looks and forced conversation. People saying life goes on as though it were some universal truth applicable to everyone. As if there were a timer for grief. He decided to take a hot shower. Maybe it would chase away the deep cold that seemed lodged in his bones. It wasn't the cold from the rain, it was something deeper that no heater could fix. In the bathroom, he turned the shower to its hottest setting, letting steam fill the small space. As the water ran over him, he closed his eyes and tried not to think of anything. This was the closest he could get to peace. 20 minutes later, he put on sweatpants and an old t-shirt. He didn't need to dress up for dinner. He had already decided not to go. He would send Janet a text with some excuse, maybe a cold. It wouldn't be a total lie, given the rain he'd endured. Outside, the storm worsened. Thunder shook the house slightly. Nathan remembered how Sophie was afraid of thunder, how she would run to his room during storms, asking to sleep beside him. "The sky monsters are fighting," she used to say. He sat on the living room armchair with a glass of whiskey. He didn't drink often, but today was different. Today deserved a temporary numbness. He turned on the lamp, the only source of light in the room darkened by the storm. Outside of work hours, Nathan avoided bright lights. The dimness matched his mood. A particularly loud thunderclap startled him, causing him to spill some whiskey on his shirt. Almost at the same time, another noise. Different, closer. Nathan frowned, unsure if he had really heard something or if it was just the storm playing tricks on him. The sound repeated. A knocking. Someone was at the door. Nathan wasn't expecting anyone. Janet wouldn't come so early, and no friends visited him anymore. He had made sure of that. Perhaps it was a neighbor, Mr. Grayson sometimes showed up to borrow tools or offer pies his wife baked. He set down the glass on the coffee table and walked slowly to the door. The knocks came again, weaker now. Nathan hesitated, hand on the doorknob, as though afraid of what he might find on the other side. When he finally opened it, the sight momentarily robbed him of speech. A small girl stood in the rain, completely drenched, wearing clothes that were worn and too big for her. Her hair was plastered to her face, and she was visibly shaking. But that wasn't what made Nathan freeze. It was her face, those eyes, the shape of her nose, the small mouth. The resemblance was striking, impossible, absurd. For one insane second, he thought Sophie had returned, like in a ghost story he never believed in. The girl stared at him, rain dripping down her pale face. "Could you help me, just until the rain stops?" she said in a rough voice, with a slight accent Nathan didn't recognize. Nathan remained motionless, unable to articulate a response. His brain tried to process what his eyes were seeing. The resemblance to Sophie couldn't be a coincidence, but it also made no sense. Sophie's eyes were lighter in color, while this girl's were darker. Sophie's hair had been lighter, yet somehow, the overall effect. It was like looking at an alternate version of his daughter. A thunderclap rumbled in the distance, and the girl flinched. "Can I come in, please? I'm really cold." Her voice snapped him back to reality. Nathan realized how long he'd been standing there, staring in shock. The child was trembling violently now, arms wrapped around herself. "Yes, of course," he finally said, stepping aside. "Come in." The girl entered the house hesitantly, as though afraid he might change his mind. Nathan closed the door, blocking out the wind and rain. Up close, under the hallway light, the differences became clearer. She was thinner than Sophie, with a more angular face, probably around the same age, maybe slightly older. Her hair was darker, not as light as Sophie's. But her eyes, her face shape, the way she bit her lower lip when nervous. "You're soaked," Nathan said, trying to regain some normalcy. "I'll get you a towel." He went to the hallway closet, grabbed a clean towel, and handed it to the girl, who took it with trembling hands. "Thank you," she mumbled, rubbing the towel over her wet hair. "Are you alone?" "Where are your parents?" Nathan asked, glancing out the window to see if anyone else was there. The girl lowered her eyes. "I don't have parents. I was at St. Catherine's orphanage." Nathan knew the place. It was about 6 miles away, near the edge of the city. An old building serving as a temporary home for children awaiting adoption. "You ran away?" The girl nodded, still not looking at him. "Why?" She shrugged, a gesture uncomfortably familiar. "They were going to send me somewhere else, farther away." Nathan realized they were still standing in the entryway. The girl was shivering even with the towel. "You must be hungry," he said, surprised by his own words. He didn't usually offer food to strangers, let alone invite them in. "Let's go to the kitchen. I can make something hot for you to drink." The girl followed him silently, towel still on her shoulders. In the kitchen, Nathan turned on the lights and pointed to one of the chairs by the table. "Have a seat. I'll make some hot chocolate." While he heated the milk, he watched her from the corner of his eye. She looked around curiously, but didn't touch anything. Her posture was cautious, as though she worried about breaking an unspoken rule. "What's your name?" Nathan asked, pouring the hot milk into a mug. "Eliza," she replied. "Eliza," he repeated, feeling the strangeness of the word on his tongue. "I'm Nathan." "Nathan," she echoed. "Thanks for the chocolate." He placed the steaming mug in front of her, along with a few crackers on a plate. "You shouldn't be out on the street alone, especially in this storm. The orphanage must be looking for you." Eliza took a sip of the chocolate, leaving a small mustache of foam above her lip. "They won't miss me until tomorrow. I thought I could make it into town before the rain." "Where were you going?" She shrugged again, that gesture that made his chest tighten. "I don't know. Just somewhere else." Nathan sat down across from her, still trying to reconcile her appearance with the impossibility of the situation. Maybe he was going crazy. Maybe the anniversary of Sophie's death, the visit to the cemetery, the stress. Maybe it was all making him see similarities where none existed. But then Eliza gave a timid smile after biting a cracker, and it hit him like a punch in the stomach. The same lopsided grin, slightly bigger on the right side. "Why are you looking at me like that?" she asked, suddenly wary. Nathan realized he was staring again. "I'm sorry, you remind me of someone." "Who?" The direct question caught him off guard. Normally, he avoided speaking about Sophie with anyone. Her name almost never left his lips. It was guarded, as though the mere act of uttering it might diminish its value. "My daughter," he answered, surprising himself. "Where is she?" Eliza asked, looking around as if expecting another child to appear. Nathan felt the familiar squeeze in his chest. "She died 1 year ago." Eliza lowered her eyes to the mug. "I'm sorry," she murmured. Silence fell between them, broken only by the sound of rain beating against the windows and the occasional roll of thunder. Nathan didn't know what to do. The situation felt surreal, a girl who looked like Sophie's twin sitting in his kitchen drinking hot chocolate. The proper procedure would be to call the orphanage or social services, report that he'd found a runaway child. But something in him resisted that idea. He couldn't simply send her back into the rain or hand her over to strangers. Not today. Not with that face. "You can stay here tonight," he heard himself say. "Tomorrow morning we'll figure out what to do." Eliza's face lit up subtly. "Really, I can. Just for one night," Nathan clarified, trying to sound firm. "I can't leave you out on the street in this storm, but tomorrow we need to resolve your situation." Eliza nodded, accepting the terms without arguing. "Do you have more?" Nathan looked at her, confused. "More what?" "Crackers," she replied, gesturing toward the empty plate. Something inside Nathan softened. He got up, retrieved the box from the cupboard, and placed more crackers on her plate. He watched her eat as if she hadn't seen food in days. Maybe she hadn't. She was so thin he could see the outline of her bones at her wrists and neck. "Do you have other clothes?" "Yours are soaked," he asked. Eliza shook her head. Nathan hesitated. The only place he'd find children's clothes was— "Wait here," he said, leaving the kitchen. Nathan went upstairs slowly, heart pounding. In the hallway, he stopped at the closed door, the same one he hadn't been able to open earlier. He took a deep breath and turned the knob. Sophie's room was exactly as she'd left it, the bed made with a unicorn blanket, stuffed animals in the corners, books on the shelf, everything preserved like a shrine. Nathan rarely went in, only to dust and ensure everything stayed intact. He went to the closet and opened the doors. Sophie's clothes were still hanging, arranged by color, just as she liked. He grabbed a pink pajama set with star prints, some socks, and a change of clothes for the next day. He closed the closet quickly before the memories overwhelmed him. When he returned to the kitchen, Eliza was looking at the photos on the wall. One showed Nathan and Sophie at a theme park. She was on a carousel and he was beside her, making sure she wouldn't fall. Both were smiling. "Is that her?" Eliza asked when she saw him. Nathan nodded, handing her the clothes. "You can wear these. The bathroom is the second door on the right in the hallway." Eliza took the clothes, running her fingers over the soft fabric. "They're so pretty," she said. "Thank you." When Eliza left to change, Nathan sat down again, trying to grasp the situation. What was he doing? Taking in a stranger, giving her Sophie's clothes. It was madness, potentially dangerous. She could be lying. She could be running some kind of scam. But that face that haunted his dreams. Eliza returned minutes later, wearing Sophie's pajamas. They were slightly large for her, especially the sleeves, but they mostly fit. She held her wet clothes folded in her arms. "We can dry those," Nathan said, taking them to the laundry room. When he came back, he found Eliza in the living room, looking at Sophie's toys still out. She kept her hands behind her back as if afraid to touch anything. "So you have a lot of toys," she commented. "They're hers," Nathan replied. "Sophie's." Saying his daughter's name in front of a stranger, something he hadn't done in months, Strangely, it didn't hurt as much as he'd expected. Eliza nodded, her eyes scanning the items: a doll on the couch, some children's books, colorful blocks. "You can sit," Nathan said, indicating the couch. She sat carefully, as though worried she might break something. Her feet barely touched the floor. Nathan didn't know what to do next. He wasn't prepared for company, let alone a child who seemed like a ghost from his past. He turned on the TV, searching for a children's channel. "Do you like cartoons?" he asked. Eliza shrugged again. "I'm not sure, I don't watch much TV." Nathan found a channel playing an animated show and placed the remote beside her. "You can watch whatever you want. I'll get the guest room ready for you." As he climbed the stairs, Nathan realized that his house, once as silent as a tomb, now had a new sound: the soft chatter of the television and an occasional childish giggle. It felt strange, unsettling, and, in a way, comforting. The guest room was rarely used, only when Janet or some other relative stayed over, which happened less and less. He quickly changed the sheets and fluffed the pillow. It was a bed far too big for a child, but it would do for one night. When he returned to the living room, Eliza was asleep on the couch. The TV was still on, but she wasn't watching anymore. She was curled up, hugging a pillow, her face relaxed in slumber. His first instinct was to wake her and guide her to the guest bed, but something stopped him. The sight was mesmerizing. A child sleeping on his couch, wearing Sophie's pajamas, with Sophie's face. Nathan went to the hallway closet and grabbed a blanket, draping it over Eliza carefully so as not to wake her. She stirred slightly but remained asleep. He sat in the armchair nearby, watching her. The resemblance was still shocking, even in sleep. He knew he should be calling the authorities. He knew that harboring a runaway orphan without notifying anyone was probably illegal, but he couldn't make himself stand up and make that call. Tomorrow, he told himself. He'd take care of it tomorrow. For now, for the first time in a year, the house didn't feel quite so empty. The silence was broken, and impossibly, a little girl with Sophie's face was sleeping on his couch. The past had returned, and Nathan wasn't sure he wanted it to leave again. Morning arrived quietly, with weak sunlight appearing after the previous night's storm. Nathan had slept on the couch. He couldn't bring himself to go upstairs. He preferred to stay in the living room like an improvised guardian, watching over the girl, but Eliza was no longer there. Nathan jolted awake, heart pounding. Had she run away again? Slipped out while he was sleeping without saying goodbye? The thought bothered him more than it should have. "Eliza," he called, voice rough with sleep. No answer. He checked the kitchen, empty. Her clothes were no longer in the laundry area. He was about to go upstairs when he heard a slight noise from above. Soft footsteps, almost imperceptible. Nathan climbed the stairs slowly, following the sound. In the hallway, Sophie's door was ajar. His heart skipped a beat. That door was always kept closed. He stopped at the entrance, trying not to make a sound. Eliza was inside, moving around the room with quiet curiosity. She still wore Sophie's pajamas, but her hair was combed, her face washed. She didn't touch anything, just observed, like a respectful visitor in a museum. Nathan couldn't muster any anger at her intrusion. There was something reverent in how she explored the space, like she knew it was special. Eliza stopped in front of the photo wall. Nathan knew exactly what she was looking at. The wall was a visual timeline. Sophie as a newborn in his arms at the hospital. Sophie taking her first steps holding his fingers. Sophie on her first day of school. Sophie blowing out birthday candles. Sophie at the beach building sandcastles. Sophie in the park on a swing at the library. In the mountains on a winter trip. Sophie in all sorts of places, always smiling, forever frozen in those images. "She looks like me," Eliza whispered, not realizing Nathan was at the door. He could have left quietly, pretended not to notice, or waited for her to leave. But instead, he stepped forward. "She was my daughter, Sophie. She went to heaven 1 year ago." Eliza turned, startled. Her eyes widened as she saw Nathan there, as though expecting to be scolded for intruding. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I shouldn't have come in here." Nathan shook his head slightly. "It's okay." Eliza looked at the photos again, eyes fixed on one in particular. Sophie happily enjoying a strawberry ice cream sitting on a park bench. That crooked smile, slightly larger on the right side. The same smile Eliza had. She was really pretty, Eliza commented, still absorbed in the photo. Yes, she was, Nathan agreed, his voice less tense than he'd expected. Talking about Sophie usually felt like stepping on glass shards, but somehow Eliza's presence made it less painful. Maybe because she didn't look at him with pity like everyone else did. What happened to her? Eliza asked, turning to Nathan. The direct question caught him off guard. It had been a long time since anyone asked him that. People either knew or avoided the topic. Nathan felt the familiar tightness in his chest, the reluctance to revisit that day. But looking at Eliza, with those eyes so much like Sophie's, he couldn't turn away. It was an accident, he said simply. We were crossing the street. A car didn't stop at the red light. He didn't mention the details, didn't talk about letting go of Sophie's hand for a second to check his phone, the sound of the impact, or how he held her in his arms while waiting for the ambulance, knowing it was already too late. Eliza nodded, as though understanding more than he was saying. Her eyes returned to the photos. She seemed really happy. She was, Nathan confirmed, taking a few steps closer. Sophie loved to laugh. She loved telling silly jokes she made up. She loved dancing around the house and drawing. The words came more easily than he anticipated. He couldn't recall the last time he'd mentioned these everyday joys about Sophie, rather than just the tragedy of her death. Did she like ice cream? Eliza asked, pointing to the photo. Nathan smiled, a movement that almost hurt his face, which had grown unused to smiling. Strawberry. It was her favorite, even in winter. Mine's chocolate, Eliza offered. Nathan nearly said it was his favorite too, but stopped. He didn't want to create artificial bridges between them. He watched Eliza walk over to Sophie's bed, where several stuffed animals were arranged against the pillows. She looked at them with an expression that was impossible to decipher. Was it envy, sadness, or something deeper? She was lucky. She had someone. The words were so quiet he almost didn't hear them. But he did, and they struck him like a physical blow, knocking the air from his lungs. Nathan closed his eyes, trying to process the impact of that sentence. In just those few words, Eliza's entire life story was revealed. Not just the lack of parents, but the lack of anyone to cherish her, to keep her photos, to know her favorite ice cream flavor. When he opened his eyes again, Eliza was watching him, gauging his reaction. There was a wisdom in her gaze that didn't fit her age, the kind of understanding that only comes from growing up unprotected. Sophie was lucky to have you as a father, Eliza continued, voice a bit firmer. Even if she went to heaven too soon, she knew someone cared. How could a child say something so profound? How could she see so clearly what had taken him months to grasp, that Sophie, despite her short life, had been loved completely, without reservation? He felt something break inside. A wall he had built around his memories, around Sophie's name, around his former life. For an entire year, he had run from any mention of his daughter, keeping the memories locked away like precious, painful secrets that no one else could see or touch. I can't talk about her, he admitted, voice trembling. I couldn't. Until now. Eliza took a few steps toward him, stopping at a safe distance. Why not? That simple question, asked without judgment, opened the floodgates. Because it hurts, Nathan replied honestly. It hurts to remember she's gone. It hurts to think of everything she'll never experience, all the birthdays she won't have, all the bedtime stories I won't get to tell her. He didn't notice he was crying until he felt the wetness on his cheeks. He hadn't cried like this in months. He'd grown used to containing his grief for specific, controlled moments, never in front of others. But Eliza wasn't just anyone. She was a child with his daughter's face and the understanding of someone far older. A child who, in some inexplicable way, had shown up at his door on the anniversary of Sophie's death. Sophie liked bedtime stories, Eliza asked, breaking the silence. Nathan wiped his tears with the back of his hand, feeling something loosen in his chest, a tension he had carried so long he hardly noticed it anymore. She loved them, he answered, and for the first time in a year there wasn't a knot in his throat when he spoke of his daughter. I used to make them up every night. Stories about dragons and knights, about fairies and enchanted forests. "Do you still remember those stories?" Eliza asked, a hint of shy curiosity in her eyes. Nathan nodded, recognizing what she was really asking. "I remember all of them." They stood there quietly for a moment, looking at each other. Between them, invisible but palpable, Sophie seemed to be there, not as a painful ghost, but almost as a comforting presence. "I'm hungry," Eliza finally said, breaking the spell. "Are there more crackers?" Nathan smiled, and this time, the movement felt natural. "I think we can find something better than crackers for breakfast. Let's see what we have in the kitchen." As they left the room, Nathan realized he hadn't closed the door behind him as he usually did. He'd left it slightly open, as though some spell had been broken, as though the shrine was finally letting in fresh air. For the first time in a year, he'd spoken about Sophie without running away, and discovered that sharing memories made them lose some of their power to hurt. After the conversation in Sophie's room, something had changed between them. An invisible wall had fallen, replaced by something else, not distrust but caution. As though they both feared breaking the fragile bond that was starting to form. Nathan prepared a more elaborate breakfast than he had for himself in months. Scrambled eggs, bacon, toast, orange juice. Nothing extraordinary, but it represented an effort he hadn't made in a long time to actually cook, rather than opening a packet of pre-made food. Eliza sat at the kitchen table, still wearing Sophie's pajamas. Her clothes were dry and folded on a nearby chair, but she hadn't changed yet. Nathan didn't mention it. He placed a plate in front of her and sat down across the table. Neither spoke. It wasn't awkward, just no need to fill the silence. It felt comfortable, so different from the hollow quiet that had ruled the house before. Nathan watched as Eliza picked up a slice of toast and meticulously cut it into perfect triangles. An odd habit. Sophie used to eat the corners first, saving the middle for last. Eliza did the opposite. She cut the toast into geometric shapes, arranged them on her plate, and ate them one by one, following some logic only she understood. A subtle smile appeared on her lips once she finished sorting the triangles, not a wide grin, but a hint of satisfaction, as if pleased at completing a little puzzle. Nathan found himself smiling too as he watched her. There was something mesmerizing about her precise motions, her concentration, the way her eyes assessed the plate like she was studying a map. A strand of dark hair fell across her face. Without thinking, Nathan leaned over and gently brushed it aside. Eliza didn't flinch, she just kept eating, as though that gesture was perfectly normal between them. The single hair lingered between Nathan's fingers. He looked at it for a moment, a thought forming in his mind. Discreetly, he folded the hair in his palm and slipped it into his shirt pocket. It was crazy, he knew. The resemblance to Sophie was astounding, but coincidences happen. Children can look alike without any relation. Besides, he knew Sophie's history. He was there for every moment of her short life, from the hospital birth to the lonely funeral. Still, there was something about Eliza's mannerisms, her gaze, the tilt of her head when she was thinking, something that went beyond mere physical likeness. "Would you like to wear your clothes now?" Nathan asked, breaking the silence. "They're dry." Eliza glanced at the folded clothes and then at the pajamas she wore. "Can I keep this on?" she asked, hesitating. "It's comfortable." Nathan nodded, surprised at how quickly he agreed. The pajamas belonged to Sophie, part of his most sacred memories, but seeing Eliza wearing them didn't hurt the way he'd expected. On the contrary, there was something comforting about it. "Sure," he said, "go ahead." "Forever." Her eyes went wide for a moment. Nathan realized his mistake. He'd been vague about how long she'd stay. The previous night, he said, just one night. But morning had come, and he still hadn't made any calls to the orphanage or social services. "For now," he answered carefully. "We'll figure things out, don't worry." Eliza nodded, returning her attention to the plate. She didn't push further. After breakfast, Nathan called his office, saying he'd be working from home for a few days. His boss didn't question it. Everyone still treated him with kid gloves after Sophie's death. He spent the morning working on his laptop in the living room, while Eliza explored the house in silence. She didn't open drawers or touch things. She only observed, as if memorizing every detail. At a certain point, Nathan picked up the phone and called an old college friend who worked at a medical lab. He walked out onto the porch so Eliza wouldn't overhear. "Mark, it's Nathan. I need a favor." "Very discreet," he said, pausing to listen to the reply. "Yes, I'm fine. I just need you to analyze a DNA sample for me." "No, it's not for a project. It's personal." It took a few minutes to explain. Mark agreed to help, still puzzled by the request. He promised discretion and said results would be ready in a few days. When Nathan came back inside, he found Eliza sitting on the living room floor, looking at the bookshelf. "Do you like stories?" he asked. She shrugged. "I don't know. No one tells stories at the orphanage." Nathan stepped to the shelf and picked up a brightly illustrated book. This was one of Sophie's favorites. It's about a girl who finds a secret door to another world. He handed the book to Eliza, who took it carefully, as if afraid of damaging its pages. "Could you tell me that story?" she asked, flipping through it and looking at the illustrations. "Sure, it's yours now." Her eyes lit up for a moment. She opened the book and began examining the colorful pictures, running her fingers over the pages with reverence. The day passed peacefully. Nathan made sandwiches for lunch. Eliza kept reading, pausing only to eat. He watched her discreetly while he worked, still grappling with the strangeness of the situation and the comfort he felt simultaneously. That evening after dinner, Nathan suggested a movie. He didn't mention that this had been another ritual he shared with Sophie. Every Friday was movie night at home, complete with popcorn and chocolates. Eliza chose an animated film about a lonely robot searching for connection. She sat on the couch, knees drawn to her chest, completely absorbed in the story. Nathan sat on the other end of the couch, keeping a respectful distance. It was odd, he thought, how quickly they'd formed this domestic routine, as if Eliza had always been there. Halfway through the movie, he realized she'd fallen asleep. Her head rested against the couch arm, hands still clutching the book she'd been reading all day. Nathan lowered the volume on the TV and watched the sleeping child. Her face bore the same serene expression Sophie had when she nodded off during a movie, a mixture of contentment and abandon, as though no worries existed for those few hours. He stood quietly and fetched a blanket from the hallway closet, the same one he'd used the previous night. Gently, he covered Eliza, who shifted slightly but didn't wake. Nathan stepped back a few paces to take in the scene, a child sleeping on his couch under a blue blanket, the television casting a soft glow on her face. The house that had felt empty for so long now sheltered life again. He realized, with a startling clarity, that the house was breathing again. The rooms didn't seem quite so deserted. The hallways no longer echoed with oppressive silence. The air felt different, as though the windows had been opened after a long winter. Eliza's single strand of hair remained in his pocket. In a few days, he'd have answers to questions he could barely formulate. Meanwhile, he allowed himself to savor this sensation that something broken was slowly, tentatively mending. Nathan turned off the TV. In the darkness of the living room, lit only by the faint glow from the kitchen, he stood for a few minutes watching Eliza sleep. She wasn't Sophie, he knew that. But there was something there, something impossible to define, that made him feel he was no longer completely alone. For a house that had known only silence for a whole year, the soft sound of a sleeping child's breathing was the sweetest symphony. The weekend arrived with a timid sun after days of rain. 3 mornings had passed since Eliza had arrived at Nathan's house. The one night had quietly stretched on, without either of them mentioning it. It was like a silent agreement, no talk of tomorrow, no tough questions. Nathan had called his boss again, requesting a few more days to work remotely. He made up a story about plumbing issues, an excuse no one questioned. He needed time to think, to decide what to do about Eliza. The strand of hair he'd collected was already at Mark's lab. Results in a few days, his friend had promised. Until then, Nathan allowed himself to live in this strange temporal bubble, where past and present blurred in the presence of a girl who so resembled Sophie. During these days, Nathan observed that Eliza was extremely perceptive. She learned quickly where everything was in the house, adapted to his schedule, never asked for anything beyond the basics. She was a child who'd learned to occupy the smallest possible space in the world, to not be a bother, to make herself nearly invisible. Nathan wondered what kind of life had taught her such skills. On this particular Saturday morning, Nathan was at his makeshift office in the dining room, answering work emails. Eliza had eaten breakfast and now ventured into the backyard, the first time she'd been outside since she arrived. Nathan glanced out the window occasionally, making sure she was okay. She wandered through the unkempt garden with cautious curiosity, touching the leaves of plants, watching birds in the trees, drawing patterns in the damp earth with a stick. She didn't play as typical children do. She moved like a small explorer, mentally cataloging each discovery. When Nathan saw her come back inside, he returned his attention to the laptop. He was focused on a tricky email from a demanding client when he realized he no longer heard Eliza's footsteps. The sudden silence alarmed him. He'd grown accustomed to the soft presence she brought. He stood and walked through the house, checking the kitchen and living room. No sign of her. He went upstairs to check the guest room where she slept. Empty. Sophie's room, the door now slightly ajar since their talk, also empty. That's when he heard it. A light sound, barely audible, a muffled giggle, like someone trying not to be noisy. Nathan followed the sound to the end of the hallway, where a door remained shut. Sophie's playroom, the only room he'd kept untouched exactly as it was on her last day. Not just preserved, but genuinely undisturbed. Toys still strewn across the floor as Sophie had left them, a board game mid-play, open markers beside a half-finished drawing. The door was now ajar. Nathan crept closer and peeked through the gap. Eliza was inside, sitting on the floor, completely absorbed in her discovery. The room was a child's treasure trove, shelves full of toys sorted by type, a large dollhouse big enough for a kid to enter, a small table, and colorful chairs for drawing or crafts, piles of board games stacked to the ceiling, and a big basket overflowing with stuffed animals. Nathan watched her pick up a rag doll, examining it with awe before carefully putting it back in its place. Then she lifted a box of colorful blocks, building and dismantling small towers. She treated every toy with respect, as though they were rare and precious artifacts. "I've never seen so many toys in my life," she murmured to herself in wonder. Conflicting emotions hit Nathan. Part of him wanted to rush in and stop her. This was Sophie's final sanctuary, the space he'd guarded so closely. Nobody had entered it since the accident. Not even the housekeeper was allowed to clean it. Almost reflexively, he pushed the door open and took a step inside. Eliza saw him immediately and froze, eyes wide like a startled deer. Her small shoulders tensed, and she gently placed the teddy bear she'd been holding back on the floor. "I'm sorry," she whispered, voice barely audible. "I shouldn't have come in here." She started to stand up, clearly preparing to leave as quickly as possible. Nathan opened his mouth to scold her, to say this room was off limits, that these things were sacred and not to be touched. But then he saw something that stopped him. In Eliza's eyes, there wasn't just fear. There was a resigned sadness, as though she already expected punishment for daring to touch something beautiful. As if life had repeatedly taught her the same lesson: beautiful things aren't for you. "It's okay," Nathan heard himself say, surprised by his own voice. "You can play here." Eliza didn't move, unsure if she had understood him correctly. "I can?" "Yes," he confirmed, stepping fully into the room. "Just be careful, okay?" She nodded vigorously, still standing, waiting for more proof she had permission. Nathan gave a small smile and motioned to the toys. They all belonged to Sophie. She used to love playing here. Eliza looked around, absorbing that information. "She was really lucky," she said softly, still hesitant to resume playing. Nathan sat in an adult chair in the corner, a chair he'd used when playing with Sophie. He gestured for Eliza to continue. "You can keep going, I won't interrupt." Slowly, as though testing boundaries, Eliza sat back on the floor. She picked up the teddy bear again, a brown bear with a red bow tie. Nathan recognized it, Mr. Buttons, one of Sophie's favorites. "Does he have a name?" Eliza asked, holding the bear carefully. "Mr. Buttons," Nathan said automatically. "He lost an eye button once, and Sophie said that made him even more special." Eliza smiled at the bear, examining it. "He does seem special," she agreed. Gradually, the initial tension dissipated. Eliza began to explore more freely, still with that near-reverent caution. Nathan allowed himself to relax in the chair, simply watching. There was something therapeutic about seeing the toys in use again, coming to life after so long. For a year, they'd been painful relics, fossilized reminders of lost happiness. Now, in Eliza's small hands, they were serving their real purpose, bringing joy. When Eliza discovered a box of costumes, her eyes lit up. There were crowns, magic wands, superhero capes, fairy wings, pirate hats. She looked at Nathan, silently seeking permission. "Try them on," he encouraged. Eliza picked up a gold plastic crown and put it on her head. It was too big, slipping down over her eyes, and she adjusted it, laughing softly. "Now I'm a princess," she announced shyly. "Every princess needs a scepter," Nathan said, leaning over to grab a star-tipped wand. He handed it to Eliza, who took it with shining eyes. "And a kingdom," she added, surveying the room as if seeing it anew. Nathan watched as she built a kingdom using colorful blocks, arranging stuffed animals as her subjects, declaring new royal laws with her wand. It was the first time he'd seen her fully act like a child, not the wary, grown-up figure who had shown up on his doorstep 3 nights ago. Gradually, without noticing, Nathan found himself included in the play. Eliza designated him the royal advisor, asking his opinion on important kingdom matters, whether lunch should be ice cream, whether dragons could be domesticated, whether clouds were made of cotton candy. He answered with mock seriousness, slipping into his role more easily than he'd have expected. When was the last time he'd played like this? Allowed himself to indulge in this fantasy world without guilt. At one point, Eliza found a blue wizard's hat covered in silver stars and placed it on Nathan's head. "Now you're magical too," she declared. Nathan adjusted the hat, ridiculously small for his adult head, and made an exaggerated bow. Eliza burst out laughing, a pure, crystalline sound filling the room. Then Nathan was laughing too, freely, without guilt or the shadow of grief, a laugh he hadn't known he could still produce. The play continued, evolving naturally. The kingdom was threatened by an invisible dragon, represented by a large beach ball, which was eventually tamed and turned into the official guardian of the royal treasure, a collection of colorful beads. Nathan was amazed by Eliza's creativity, impressive for a child who claimed she'd never seen so many toys. At some point, she found a box of colored pencils and paper. She sat at the small table, drawing intensely, her tongue poking out the corner of her mouth, another gesture that reminded him painfully of Sophie. "What are you drawing?" Nathan asked, walking over. "Our kingdom," Eliza replied without looking up. Nathan observed the drawing taking shape, childish lines but surprisingly detailed, a castle, trees, what looked like her wearing the crown, and a taller figure beside her, presumably Nathan with the wizard hat. "You're really good at drawing," he commented. Eliza shrugged but smiled at the compliment. "At the orphanage, sometimes we had paper and pencils. I like to draw." As she continued drawing, Nathan noticed an open shoebox by the table. Inside were several notebooks and loose pages, Sophie's old drawings. Eliza must have found it while searching for paper. A pang of alarm hit him. Those were personal treasures, intimate memories. But then he realized he didn't mind Eliza seeing them. Somehow it felt right. Eliza finished her drawing and held it out to Nathan. "It's for you," she said softly, "to thank you for letting me stay here." Nathan took the paper, genuinely moved. "Thank you, Eliza, I'll keep it safe." As he looked at the drawing, Eliza turned her attention back to the shoebox. She picked up a purple-covered notebook, Sophie's sketch diary. Nathan watched as she flipped through it carefully, admiring the bright drawings of a child. Eliza paused on one page, her eyes widening. "What's this?" she asked, showing Nathan the notebook. It showed 2 girls holding hands, one slightly taller than the other, both wearing colorful dresses. Above the drawing, in a child's messy handwriting, were the words, "Me and the girl from my dreams." Nathan felt a chill down his spine. He vaguely remembered that drawing. Sophie had made it after a high fever when she was sick for almost a week. She'd mentioned dreaming of a special friend, a friend who played with her in her dreams. Sophie drew that after she was sick, he explained, voice a bit rough. She said she dreamed of an imaginary friend. Eliza kept looking at the drawing, spellbound. She ran her fingers over the images gently, as if she could feel the texture of the colors. Who's the other girl? She asked. I don't know, Nathan admitted. Sophie called her the girl from my dreams. She said it was a special friend who only appeared when she was asleep. Eliza continued to trace the page with her fingertips, her eyes fixed on the two figures holding hands. There was something unusual in her expression. Not mere childlike curiosity, but something deeper, as though she was trying to recall a buried memory, or forging a connection she couldn't explain. I dream too, she said quietly, almost to herself. There's a girl who plays with me, but I can never see her face. Nathan felt his heart rate spike. Coincidence, or something more? He hoped the DNA results would offer some answers, but each moment with Eliza led to new questions. Dreams are mysterious, he offered, trying to keep his tone light despite the storm of thoughts in his mind. Eliza finally tore her gaze from the notebook and looked at Nathan. Do you think Sophie and I could have been dreaming about each other? Even if we never met? The question, posed with childhood simplicity, struck Nathan like lightning. Impossible, of course. And yet, who knows, he replied, unable to find a better answer. Eliza closed the notebook gently and put it back in the box. Can I keep playing? She asked, returning to the tangible reality of the moment. Sure, Nathan said, still shaken by the strange coincidence. While Eliza went back to exploring the toys, Nathan remained seated, observing her. The moment with the drawing had added a new layer of mystery around her, not just her resemblance to Sophie, but also this inexplicable dream connection. Afternoon light streamed through the windows, bathing the playroom in a golden glow. Watching Eliza play with Sophie's beloved things, Nathan realized something fundamental had changed. The playroom, which for so long had been a painful mausoleum of frozen memories, was alive again. The toys had returned to their original purpose, bringing joy to a child. And he, once the guardian of an unchanging past, was allowing himself to look at the present, maybe even the future. Eliza put on a pirate hat and wielded a plastic sword, declaring that the kingdom was now under threat from friendly pirates. Nathan adjusted his wizard hat, ready for another round of make-believe. From the corner of his eye, he saw the purple notebook in the shoebox, two girls holding hands. Me and the girl from my dreams. There were more mysteries in this house than Nathan could understand. But for now, as he laughed freely for the first time in a year, he decided the mysteries could wait. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday. Nathan found it among the usual mail and recognized it immediately. Mark's lab had kept its promise. The DNA test results were inside, the answer to the mystery that had plagued him since Eliza showed up at his door. He waited until evening, after Eliza fell asleep, to open it. Sitting in his office with a half-finished glass of whiskey, he carefully tore the paper and pulled out the report. Positive result, genetic compatibility, father-daughter. The confirmation hit him like a lightning bolt. Eliza was his biological daughter. Not just uncannily similar to Sophie, they shared his DNA. Her striking resemblance now had an explanation, but so many questions remained. How was it possible? How had he never known Eliza existed? Nathan ran a hand over his face, trying to organize his thoughts. He needed answers. He went down to the basement, where he kept old records. Boxes neatly labeled by year contained documents, contracts, tax returns, meticulous traces of his life. Maybe there would be something, some clue explaining the inexplicable. The search lasted for hours. He sifted through dusty documents, scoured financial records, paged through old photo albums. He was about to give up when he found a folder simply marked Personal 2016. Inside were various documents related to temporary workers who had been employed at his home. One name jumped off the page, Mara Cardoso. A chill ran through Nathan. The name triggered a dormant memory. A young woman with dark hair and intense eyes, hired for a short-term job organizing his library after a renovation. He closed his eyes, letting the memory take shape. Mara had worked at the house for a few months. She was educated, had a slight accent he could never quite place. She spoke passionately about literature. She had a laugh like music. At the time, Nathan had been married to Clara, but the marriage was a formality at best. Clara was always away, travel, commitments, living a life separate from his. Loneliness brought Nathan and Mara together. Conversations in the library turned into late dinners, which turned into a discreet affair that lasted a few weeks. Now the memory was stark, and he felt a weight he didn't know he carried. Mara had appeared in his office one rainy day. She looked pale, nervous, with dark circles under her eyes. "I'm pregnant," she had said, with no accusations or demands, and Nathan felt shame recalling his reaction. Instead of taking responsibility, he panicked. His marriage, his career, his carefully ordered life, all threatened by this unexpected revelation. He had offered her money, a lot of money, to solve the problem. When Mara refused, saying she wouldn't abort, he offered more, for her to disappear, to keep his secret, to raise the child far from his life. Mara accepted the money and left the next day. Nathan buried the episode deep in his memory, piling layers of denial over it. Months later, when Clara announced she was pregnant, he latched onto it as a second chance, forgetting all about Mara and the child she carried. Sophie was born, and Nathan fell in love with his daughter instantly. When Clara filed for divorce 3 years later, he fought only for Sophie's custody, which he easily won. Clara had never shown much maternal interest. Now, sitting in the dusty basement, Nathan confronted the terrible truth. Mara had given birth to the baby, Eliza, his biological daughter, who for some inexplicable reason looked almost exactly like Sophie. "I let her go," he whispered to himself, voice thick with guilt and regret. He couldn't sleep now. He went back up to his office, rummaging in his contacts for a number he rarely used. Michael Keegan, a private investigator he'd hired during the divorce. It was almost 3 in the morning when he dialed. Michael answered, sounding groggy. "Keegan here? Michael, it's Nathan Wells. I know it's later, but this is urgent. I need your services again." A pause, then the sound of movement. "Wells, long time. What happened?" "I want to find the mother of the girls," Nathan said, voice thick with emotion. "Her name is Mara Cardoso. Worked for me in 2016. I need to find her as soon as possible." "Girls, plural." Michael sounded puzzled but remained professional. "I'll need more details." Nathan provided everything he could recall: Mara's appearance, approximate age, the months she worked for him, the amount of money he'd transferred to her. "I'll start immediately," Michael assured him. "If she's still in the country, I'll find her." "Money is no object," Nathan emphasized. "Just find her. It's more important than you know." After hanging up, Nathan went to the bedroom where Eliza slept. He looked at her peaceful face in the dim light, so much like Sophie's it hurt. How could he not have seen it earlier? How had he missed that they were practically duplicates? Returning to his own room, sleep refused to come. He spent the rest of the night scrolling through old photos of Sophie, now seeing clearly the features both girls shared. Michael Keegan was efficient. 3 days later, he called with news. "Found her," he said. "She's living in a small town about 120 miles away. Works as a librarian. I just sent you the address." Nathan exhaled deeply, thanked him, and hung up. He looked at Eliza, who was quietly drawing at the kitchen table, unaware of everything. He couldn't take her with him, not before understanding the whole story. "Eliza, I have to take a trip tomorrow. It'll be quick, just 1 day. My sister Janet will stay here with you, is that okay?" The girl glanced up from her drawing, a flicker of worry crossing her face. "You'll come back, right?" That simple, direct question revealed her greatest fear, being abandoned again. Nathan crouched beside her. "I'll come back, I promise. It's something I can't postpone." Eliza nodded, accepting his word without argument. The next morning, after leaving Eliza with Janet, who asked a dozen questions he skillfully dodged, Nathan hit the road. During the 3-hour drive, his mind buzzed with questions and theories. The municipal library where Mara worked was a modest building. Nathan took a deep breath before entering, unsure how he'd explain himself after all these years. When he saw her behind the desk, his heart pounded. Mara looked different. Shorter hair, a few fine lines on her face. but still unmistakable. The same dark eyes Eliza had inherited. She recognized him instantly. Nathan saw shock in her expression, followed by a resigned sadness, as though she always knew this day would come. "Nathan," she said simply, not as a question, but a statement. "Mara," he replied, voice nearly failing, "we need to talk." She nodded, said a few words to a co-worker, and led him to a small study room in the back of the library. She closed the door, and they stood in silence for several seconds, weighed down by unspoken secrets. "How did you find me?" Mara finally asked. "A private investigator. That's not important now," Nathan said, pausing to gather courage. "Eliza is with me." Mara's face went pale. "How?" "She showed up at my door. She ran away from the orphanage during a storm," Nathan said, drawing a deep breath. "She looked so much like Sophie I almost didn't believe it. I did a DNA test. She's my daughter." Mara collapsed into a chair as though her legs no longer supported her. "I always knew this day would come," she whispered. "How is she?" "All things considered, she's okay." Nathan looked her in the eye. "Mara, I need to understand. Why was Eliza in an orphanage? And why does she look so much like Sophie?" Mara glanced at the small window in the study room. "When I left your house, I was pregnant with twins," she began, voice quiet but firm. "I found out in the 3rd month. I was alone, no family. Little money despite what you gave me. Most went to medical care." Nathan felt the world tilt beneath him. Twins. The word echoed in his mind like a bell. "When the girls were born, I realized I couldn't raise both," Mara continued. "I was alone, working 2 jobs and living in a rented room." She paused, tears rolling freely now. "I made the hardest decision of my life." "What decision?" Nathan asked, though he already suspected the answer. "I kept Sophie for a year, but my situation only got worse. I couldn't give her the life she deserved." Mara wiped her tears. "And Eliza? I left her at the orphanage right after birth, promising myself I'd return when I could. But Sophie?" Nathan asked, confused. "Sophie was born to my wife. I was there at the hospital. I saw the birth." Mara shook her head slowly. "No, Nathan. The child you knew as Sophie was my daughter, our daughter. I brought her to your house when she was almost a year old. I left her at your door with a note saying, 'Take care of our daughter.'" Nathan felt as if he'd been punched. It was absurd, impossible, yet it explained everything: the uncanny resemblance between the girls, Clara's detachment from the child, the bizarre dreams Eliza had mentioned. "Clara was never pregnant," Mara went on, unyielding in her revelations. "She saw a chance to save your marriage when she found a baby on the doorstep, with a note identifying you as the father. She convinced you the child was hers too, that she'd hidden the pregnancy." Nathan leaned against the wall, legs weak. Memories flashed through his mind in jumbled confusion. Clara suddenly announcing a pregnancy, refusing to go to medical appointments with him, the emergency birth where he was only allowed in after it was over. A complex web of lies, and he, desperate to believe, had accepted it all without question. "Why?" he asked, voice almost inaudible. "Why separate the sisters?" Mara looked directly into his eyes, her face etched with pain and resolve. "I just wanted one of them to have a chance. With you, Sophie could have everything: education, comfort, opportunity. I thought maybe I could save up and reclaim Eliza later, at least raise one of them decently." She took a shaky breath. "But I never managed it. Each year it got harder." "And when Sophie died?" Nathan asked, feeling the familiar pang that word carried. "I almost lost my mind," Mara admitted. "I wanted to get Eliza immediately, but I was afraid of you, of your reaction, afraid I couldn't care for her. So I kept putting it off, visiting her secretly at the orphanage, promising I'd bring her home soon, but until she got tired of waiting and ran away." Nathan sank into a chair, overwhelmed. Sophie, his Sophie, had never been Clara's child. She was Mara's child, Eliza's twin, both his biological daughters, separated by tragic circumstances. "Why didn't you ever come to me?" he asked, anger surfacing. "I had the right to know." "You pushed me away, Nathan," Mara said without bitterness. You paid me to disappear. You made it clear you didn't want any responsibility. Why would I seek out a man who didn't want his own children? Her words slapped him. She was right. He'd been a coward, choosing the easiest path. I tried to do the best for them, Mara continued, her voice softening. I know I made mistakes, but I never wanted to hurt them. I just wanted them to survive, to have a chance. Nathan covered his face with his hands, tears impossible to hold back. Everything finally clicked. Strange coincidences, dreams, the supernatural likeness. They were both my daughters, he whispered, voice breaking. And I failed them both. Mara didn't respond. There was no adequate reply. When Nathan finally looked up, his eyes were bloodshot, but there was a fierce determination in them. I won't fail again, not with Eliza. What are you going to do? Mara asked, a hint of alarm in her voice. Give her what she deserves. A home, safety, unconditional love, Nathan said firmly. What about you? What will you do? The question hung between them, heavy with unspoken implications. Mara looked out the window at the darkening sky. I don't know, she finally admitted. I'm not sure I have the right to be in her life after everything. Nathan stood, gathering the pieces of his shattered dignity. That's something we'll have to work out, together or apart, he said, pausing to lock eyes with her. But first, I need to get back home. I promised Eliza I would come back. Driving home through the beginning of another storm, Nathan felt the weight of truth on his shoulders. He had discovered far more than he'd sought, more than he ever imagined. Both were his daughters, Sophie and Eliza, twins separated by poverty, by circumstance, by the wrong decisions of the adults who should have protected them. And he had failed them both. He had failed Sophie by not questioning the circumstances of her arrival in his life. 447. He had failed Eliza before she was even born, denying her a father, a home, a family. Now only one daughter remained. One chance at redemption. One opportunity to do the right thing, finally. Nathan sped through the storm, eager to get home, to see Eliza, to begin repairing the mistakes of the past, to build a future where the ghosts could finally rest. The drive back felt endless. Nathan kept his eyes on the dark road, made darker by the brewing storm, but his mind replayed every detail of his conversation with Mara, trying to process the devastating truth. Twins. Sophie and Eliza were twins, his daughters, both of them. One was gone forever, and the other had spent years in an orphanage, unaware she had a father, a sister, a history. When he finally reached his home, it was night. The living room lights glowed, casting dancing shadows across the front garden. Nathan remained in the car for a few moments, reorganizing his thoughts, preparing to face Janet and her inevitable questions. More than that, preparing to face Eliza. How would he look at her now, knowing who she truly was? He took a deep breath and stepped out of the car. The rain had stopped, but the air was still damp and heavy, either after or before another storm. Nathan opened the front door and entered. Janet was in the kitchen, preparing something. The aroma of hot chocolate drifted through the air. She looked up when she heard him come in, her face a mix of relief and mild reproach. Finally, I was getting worried. You could have called. Sorry, Nathan muttered, glancing around. Where's Eliza? Upstairs. In the guest room. Janet moved closer, drying her hands on a dish towel, studying his face. Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. Nathan didn't respond immediately. In a way, that's exactly what had happened. He had faced ghosts from his past, mistakes he thought were buried. I'm just tired. Thanks for staying with her. Janet didn't seem convinced, but nodded. She's a special child, Nathan. So quiet, so observant. She reminds me of Sophie sometimes. Nathan felt a pang in his chest. If Janet, who'd barely spent time with Sophie, also noticed the resemblance, what else had he been ignoring? Was there any trouble? He asked, trying to change the subject. None. But... Janet hesitated, looking uneasy. She got anxious after you left, asked multiple times if you'd really come back. Nathan closed his eyes briefly. Of course Eliza would doubt him. She had spent her whole life being left behind. There's something else, Janet went on, lowering her voice. I found her packing her things when I went upstairs to call her for dinner, an old backpack and her clothes, like she was getting ready to leave. The news hit Nathan like a physical blow. Eliza was planning to run away again. Maybe she feared that once he was gone, she'd have no reason to stay. Or maybe she simply didn't believe any place or person could remain in her life. I need to talk to her, Nathan said, heading for the stairs. Do you mind waiting here a few minutes? Janet nodded, looking worried, but asked no further questions. Nathan climbed the steps slowly, each one feeling weighted by the burden of everything he'd learned. What would he tell Eliza? How could he explain the truth? Should he lay it all out now, or wait until she felt more secure? How much truth could a child handle? He stopped at the guest room door, listening to the silence within. He knocked softly. Eliza, it's me. Can I come in? Okay, came the small voice after a brief pause. Nathan opened the door and found her sitting on the edge of the bed. She was indeed packing her things, as Janet had said. The old backpack she'd brought in that storm was open on the bed, containing her few possessions. She was holding Sophie's pajamas, the ones she loved wearing. You came back, Eliza said, a statement, not a question. There was relief in her voice, but also a guarded sadness, as though ready for everything to fall apart at any moment. I promised I would, Nathan replied, moving closer. He sat in the chair by the bed, watching her. What are you doing? Eliza looked at the backpack, then back at him, still clutching the pajamas. I'm packing, she said simply. Your sister is nice. She made me hot chocolate and told me stories. Nathan nodded, trying to find the right words. Eliza went on before he could speak. You've been good to me, but you don't have to keep me here. That phrase, spoken with such resignation, broke Nathan's heart. He recognized in her voice the years of practice in expecting nothing, asking for nothing, believing in nothing. A child shouldn't sound so resigned. Nathan stood from the chair and knelt in front of her, at eye level with those big dark eyes. Sophie's eyes, Mara's eyes. Eliza, look at me, he said gently. She lifted her gaze, a mix of hope and fear shimmering there. You're not going anywhere, Nathan told her, each word brimming with certainty. You are my daughter. Eliza's face froze in disbelief. For a moment, it seemed she hadn't understood or didn't believe. Your daughter, she repeated, voice almost inaudible. Yes, Nathan confirmed, feeling a lump in his throat. I just found out. I did a test and it confirmed it. Confirmed. You're my biological daughter, Eliza. She kept staring at him, eyes now welling with tears. Her mouth opened once, twice, but no words formed. I know it's a lot to take in, Nathan continued gently. There's a complicated story behind it, which I'll explain bit by bit. But the most important part is this. You are my daughter. And this is your home now if you want it. That final barrier broke. One tear slipped out, then another, and suddenly Eliza was sobbing openly, deep sobs that seemed to come from an ancient, wounded place inside her. She dropped the pajamas and practically fell into Nathan's arms, hugging him with surprising strength. Nathan wrapped his arms around her, feeling her warm tears soak his shirt. He was crying too now, not even trying to stop it. It was a different kind of crying than he'd done all year, not just for loss, but for reunion, for finding someone. I have a dad, Eliza asked between sobs, voice muffled against his chest. A real one, Nathan assured, stroking her hair, and I'm not going anywhere, never again. They stayed like that for several minutes, both clinging to each other, tears gradually subsiding. When they finally pulled apart, Eliza's eyes were red, but a tentative smile began to form on her lips. What now? She asked. Now we take it one step at a time, Nathan said. First, let's put this backpack away. You don't need it anymore. Eliza glanced at the old bag on the bed and, after a moment's hesitation, zipped it up and pushed it aside, a symbolic gesture like closing a chapter of her life. Then I believe there's hot chocolate waiting downstairs, Nathan continued, standing and offering his hand. And tomorrow, we'll start the process of making everything official. Eliza took his hand, her eyes calmer now. as though a heavy burden had been lifted from her small shoulders. In the weeks that followed, Nathan navigated the bureaucracy of adoption proceedings. He explained the situation to the authorities, at least part of it. The DNA test opened many doors, although the unusual circumstances raised eyebrows. Eliza's history of abandonment, her lengthy stay in the orphanage without adoption, and now the revelation of her biological father required adjustments to standard rules. Mara also attended the hearings, confirming she was the biological mother and signing the paperwork to relinquish custody to Nathan. Visits between her and Eliza were arranged with professional guidance, starting with brief, supervised meetings. It was a delicate process, filled with complex emotions for everyone. One clear autumn morning, nearly 2 months after Eliza arrived, Nathan took her to court for the final adoption hearing. The judge was an older man with kind eyes behind thick glasses. He reviewed the documents one last time, appearing satisfied. "Well, everything seems in order," he announced, looking over his glasses at Eliza, who sat beside Nathan wearing her nicest dress, a gift from Janet. "We just need to finalize a few details." A court clerk approached with the final forms. "Full name of the child?" she asked, pen in hand. A brief silence. Nathan looked at Eliza, giving her the chance to answer. Eliza smiled, a bright, confident smile, free of the hesitancy that had once marked her face. "Eliza Wells," she said without hesitation. The clerk jotted down the name, but the judge noticed something. "Do you want a middle name, Miss Wells?" he asked kindly. Eliza looked at Nathan, then at the judge, and finally replied, "Eliza Sophie Wells." Nathan felt tears forming again, but this time he let them fall. Somehow, it felt right. An homage to the sister Eliza never knew yet, with whom she shared more than just DNA. When they left the courthouse, final adoption papers tucked under Nathan's arm, the autumn sun bathed the city in golden light. Eliza skipped alongside him, more excited than he'd ever seen her, repeating her new full name as if it were a magic spell. "Eliza Sophie Wells, Eliza Sophie Wells," she chanted, clutching Nathan's hand. Watching her, Nathan thought of everything they'd endured to reach this day: pain, loss, secrets, but also unexpected reunions, discoveries, second chances. Now, Eliza had a name carrying her history, her identity, her belonging. She had a home, not just a roof overhead, but a place where she mattered, where she was special. And she had a father, someone who chose her despite all the complications and scars. "Where are we going now, Dad?" Eliza asked, the word Dad still new on her tongue, spoken with almost reverent care. Nathan smiled, gently squeezing her hand. "Home, Eliza. We're going home." Winter arrived milder that year. The days were still short and chilly, but the sun broke through more often, melting the light dusting of snow on lawns and roofs. It was as if even the weather cooperated in this new beginning unfolding at the Wells home. 3 months had passed since Eliza's official adoption. 3 months of adjustments, discoveries, and daily victories. Nathan had enrolled her in a local school, where she revealed a sharp, curious mind, soaking up knowledge with a hunger that surprised her teachers. At home, she now occupied her own space, no longer the guest room, but a bedroom decorated in soft green, with shelves for books and a desk for drawing. The old playroom, once Sophie's exclusive realm, had become a shared space where past and present peacefully coexisted. Over time, memories found their proper place, not so painful that they suffocated, nor so hidden that they disappeared, simply part of the story that brought them here. That Sunday morning at breakfast, Nathan realized Sophie's birthday was approaching the following week. He hadn't mentioned it to Eliza, unsure how the date would affect them both. The previous year had been consumed by grief. The idea of celebrating felt almost sacrilegious. Eliza noticed his distant expression and tilted her head, curious. "You're thinking about something," she observed, not as a question but a statement. Over the past months, she had become remarkably skilled at reading his moods. Nathan hesitated. They had agreed to always be honest with each other, even about tough topics. A silent pact formed when they began their new life together. Sophie's birthday would be next week, he said gently. Eliza nodded thoughtfully. Since learning she was Sophie's twin, she had shown a careful curiosity about her sister, asking occasional questions, looking at photos, trying to piece together an image of the person she never met, yet shared so much with. "Are you going to visit her?" Eliza asked, meticulously spreading jam on her toast. "Yes," Nathan answered. "I always visit her grave on her birthday." Eliza looked up from the toast, her gaze unexpectedly mature. "Can I come too?" The request surprised Nathan. He had never considered taking Eliza to the cemetery. It seemed a heavy place for a child with such a complicated background. But seeing her earnest face, he understood it was important to her. "Are you sure?" he asked, giving her room to change her mind. Eliza nodded firmly. "She was my sister," she said simply. "I never got to meet her, but I'd at least like to say hello." Nathan felt his heart warm, despite everything she had endured. Abandonment, loneliness, the harsh orphanage. Eliza had a remarkable capacity for empathy and caring. "In that case, well, we'll go together," he agreed. On Sophie's birthday, they rose early. The sky was a deep blue, cloudless. Nathan helped Eliza bundle up against the cold, layering clothes for warmth. They didn't talk much, but the silence was respectful, as though preparing for something significant. On the way, they stopped at a flower shop. Nathan was ready to buy his usual bouquet of white lilies, but Eliza paused in front of a bucket filled with bright sunflowers. "Did Sophie like these?" she asked, touching a vibrant yellow petal. "They were her favorite," Nathan confirmed, surprised Eliza had chosen them. "She said they were happy flowers because they always followed the sun." Eliza gave a small, meaningful smile. "I want to bring her a sunflower, please." Nathan purchased one sunflower for Eliza and kept his usual lilies. As they drove to the cemetery, he noticed how carefully she held the flower, as if it were fragile and precious. The cemetery was quiet that morning, with only a few visitors walking among the headstones. Nathan led Eliza along a familiar path under ancient oak trees to a children's section. Sophie's grave was simple, a polished marble stone bearing her name, birth and death dates, and the inscription, "Beloved Daughter." "Forever in our hearts." Nathan felt the familiar tightness in his chest upon seeing her name, but this time the pain didn't consume him. He watched as Eliza approached the grave carefully, as if in a sacred place. She knelt on the grass and gently placed the sunflower on the headstone. She stayed silent for a moment, head bowed slightly, as if in a private conversation unheard by the rest of the world. Nathan stayed a few steps back, giving her space. He saw Eliza trace the letters of Sophie's name with her fingertips. Then, in a clear but soft voice, and she spoke, "Thank you for saving my place." 5 simple words, yet laden with meaning. Tears filled Nathan's eyes, but they weren't purely sad tears. There was something profoundly right in that moment, as if a circle had finally closed. Eliza stood and walked back to him. Wordlessly, she offered her small hand. Nathan took it and squeezed gently. Then, looking at the child, fate had brought back into his life. This second chance he never believed he deserved. Nathan smiled, a genuine, free smile, unburdened by the guilt that had weighed him down. For the first time in a year, his smile reached his eyes. They stayed there for a while, hand in hand, father and daughter united by the memory of who they'd lost and the gratitude for what they'd found. The bright sunflower stood out on the white marble like a personal little sun lighting the path to the future they'd build together. When they finally left the cemetery, the sun was high in the sky. Nathan noticed Eliza walked differently, lighter steps, relaxed shoulders, as though she'd left a burden behind. "Are you okay?" he asked, opening the car door for her. Eliza thought for a moment, then nodded. "I am," she answered simply. "I feel complete now." On the drive home, they traveled in a comfortable silence, Nathan sneaking occasional glances at the girl beside him. He thought about all the coincidences, choices, and accidents leading to this moment. How life could be both cruel and generous, taking with one hand while giving with the other. The house waiting for them was no longer a mausoleum of painful memories, nor was it something entirely new, devoid of history. It was better, a home where past and present found a way to coexist, where ghosts no longer haunted but guarded, where life moved on with its imperfect, wondrous cycle. Eliza switched on the radio, and a gentle melody filled the car. Nathan smiled again, easier this time, like a muscle remembering how to move after long disuse. For the first time in a year, the future no longer seemed like a barren, intimidating landscape, but a path worth walking. Together, spring came in full force, mirroring the rebirth inside the Wells home. The cemetery visit marked a turning point for Nathan and Eliza, not an ending but a new beginning. Something had changed between them, an invisible barrier disintegrating so that both could breathe more freely. Eliza thrived at school, slowly making friends at her own cautious pace. Nathan returned to the office 3 days a week, balancing his career with fatherhood. Sometimes Mara visited on Sundays. Her relationship with Eliza remained complicated, full of contradictory emotions. But with each visit, small bridges were built. The house that once felt like a mausoleum now radiated life. Laughter echoed in the hallways. The kitchen rarely fell silent. There was always some meal being cooked. And Nathan discovered he liked cooking, especially when Eliza perched on a stool, watching him, asking questions or suggesting ingredients with her childlike logic. Only one space remained untouched, Sophie's bedroom. Since the day Eliza explored it and found the photo, the door had remained closed, not locked or forbidden, just respectfully shut, as if both understood that room needed its own time to transform. Nathan pondered this often. Eliza's bedroom, the former guest room, had been redecorated and personalized, but it was small. Sophie's room was larger, brighter, with a window overlooking the backyard. It would be perfect for a growing child, yet he hesitated, unsure if Eliza would feel comfortable there, unsure if he himself was ready. One sunny Saturday afternoon, while Nathan was arranging some books on the living room shelf, Eliza appeared at his side, silently. She still had that habit, approaching quietly before asking an important question. "What is it?" Nathan asked, recognizing the signs. Eliza bit her lower lip, a gesture she made when gathering courage. "Can I ask you something hard?" Nathan knelt, so he was at eye level. "Of course, you can ask me anything." She took a deep breath. Why is her room always closed? Is it because it hurts you too much to see it? Direct, blunt, typical Eliza. In the months they'd lived together, Nathan had learned she tackled difficult subjects head-on, without the sugar-coating adults often apply for children. At first, that was it, he answered honestly. It hurt a lot to see her things, to remember she wasn't coming back. And now? Nathan thought for a moment. Now it's more complicated. It's not that same sharp pain. It's not knowing exactly what to do with that space, how to honor her memory while still moving forward. Eliza nodded, taking in his words with a seriousness that often surprised him. "I dreamed about that room last night," she confessed. "It was filled with sunlight and someone was playing there, but I couldn't see who." A shiver ran through Nathan. Eliza's dreams always intrigued him, especially when Sophie was involved. "Would you like to see the room again?" he asked, the idea forming as he spoke. She nodded quietly. Together, they climbed the stairs, their footsteps echoing on the polished wood. They stopped before the closed door, a physical and emotional barrier separating past from present. Nathan took a deep breath and turned the knob, opening the door slowly. Afternoon light streamed through the half-open curtains, bathing the room in a warm, golden glow. The air felt slightly stale, but not oppressive, just the stillness of a place waiting patiently for visitors. Eliza hovered on the threshold, as though waiting for explicit permission to enter. Nathan stepped aside, inviting her in silently. She walked in carefully once again with that quiet reverence of someone entering hallowed ground. The room looked exactly as before, the unicorn comforter on the bed, the bookshelf filled with Sophie's favorite titles and trinkets, the plush rug, the small desk near the window. Sophie was present in every corner, every color choice, every object. Eliza moved around, gently touching items as she had on her first visit. But this time, something was different in her expression. Not just curiosity, but recognition, familiarity that shouldn't be possible for someone who'd barely spent time here. She stopped by the window, gazing at the backyard where early spring flowers had begun to bloom. Sunlight lit her face, highlighting faint freckles on her nose, so much like Sophie's. "I missed this even though I didn't know it," she said softly, as if speaking to herself. Nathan stepped closer, standing beside her. "What do you mean?" Eliza frowned, searching for the right words. "It's like when you're really thirsty, but don't realize it until you take that first sip of water." She paused. "I never had a place like this, but it feels like my heart remembers." The simple depth of her words made Nathan's chest tighten. Again, that strange sense that the twins shared something beyond the physical, a bond he might never fully grasp. Or maybe it was just Eliza's natural longing for a home. Either way, he felt humbled. "This room belongs to you too," Nathan said, the words coming easily. Eliza turned to him, eyes questioning. "Really? But what about her things?" "We can store some and keep others," he explained. "This space can honor Sophie and still be your room now. I think she'd like that." A tentative smile curved Eliza's lips. "Can I sleep here tonight?" "Of course," Nathan agreed. "We can move your stuff in little by little. We can reshape this room together." Eliza nodded, satisfied by the suggestion. She walked to the bed and sat on the edge, running her hand over the unicorn comforter. "Can I stay here alone for a bit?" she asked. "Just to see how it feels." "Sure," Nathan replied, understanding her need to process everything in her own way. "I'll be downstairs whenever you're ready." As he turned to leave, he saw Eliza lying down on the bed, gazing at the ceiling, where small glow-in-the-dark stars formed constellations. The scene looked so right, like a missing puzzle piece finally snapping into place. Pausing in the hallway, Nathan glanced back at the open door. Sunlight now poured in freely, illuminating a space that had stayed in the shadows too long, just like his heart. He went downstairs feeling an odd lightness. It was as though the house was finally whole. Not the same as before, nothing would ever be the same, but whole in a new way, brimming with possibilities he hadn't imagined. In the kitchen, he started preparing dinner, hearing the occasional floor creak overhead, where Eliza moved around her new territory. Once in a while, he heard her soft laughter floating down like music. The room that had held only silence and memories now glowed with life again. A room filled with light, emerging from the shadows of grief and into the brightness of hope. Just like them. Summer arrived with long days and a seemingly endless blue sky. A year had passed since that stormy night when Eliza knocked on Nathan's door. A year of transformations, discoveries, and small and large steps toward healing. A year that felt both fleeting and like an entire lifetime. The house that had once held only silence and absence now overflowed with life. Every room was in some way renewed. Sophie's old bedroom, now shared with Eliza, held elements of both girls. The beloved books Sophie left behind lined up next to Eliza's colorful drawings. The unicorn comforter was still on the bed, but now joined by new stuffed animals. The walls, once pale pink, now featured a painted panel of stars that Nathan and Eliza had created on a rainy weekend. The playroom wasn't a frozen museum anymore. The toys, now regularly scattered and reorganized, truly lived again in a child's hands. The kitchen rarely stayed silent. If empty, it still carried the aroma of a shared meal. One Sunday morning, Nathan woke to the familiar sound of Eliza's bare feet running along the hallway. He smiled before even opening his eyes. This was the new rhythm of the house, starting the day with energy, purpose, and excitement for what lay ahead, rather than weighted by the pain of what had been lost. He went downstairs to find Eliza already in the kitchen, reaching for the cereal boxes in the high cupboard. "Good morning," he said, yawning. "Need some help?" Eliza turned with a grin. Her hair was messy, a dark halo around her face. She'd grown a few inches in the past months, and her eyes now held a constant sparkle that hadn't been there before. That look of a child who feels safe, loved, home. "I wanted cereal, but I was also thinking of making bread today," she announced, as if revealing a master plan. "Like you taught me." "Sounds like a great idea," Nathan agreed, handing her the cereal box. "Oh, but breakfast first." They ate together, talking about the day's plans. That was how it always went now. Simple schedules, shared expectations, a safe routine sprinkled with small adventures. "Can I play in the backyard later?" Eliza asked as she helped clear the bowls to the sink. "Sure," Nathan replied. "While you play, I'll start getting the dough ready." A short while later, Eliza headed out to the backyard. Nathan watched her through the kitchen window as he measured flour. The once neglected garden was now lively, full of colorful blooms and even a small vegetable patch they tended together. Eliza dashed across the grass, chasing butterflies or maybe imaginary creatures. She'd built what she called a fort under the old apple tree, sheets draped over low branches, forming a perfect hideout for solo adventures, or when her few but loyal new school friends came over. Nathan finished kneading the dough and set it aside to rise, covering it with a clean cloth. He stepped onto the porch, settling into the rocking chair he'd recently installed. From there, he could watch Eliza at play, lost in a world part real, part imaginary. Sunlight filtered through the apple tree's leaves, creating shifting patterns on Eliza's face as she concentrated on arranging stones in a circle, perhaps building something important in her mind. Sometimes she spoke aloud, possibly to herself or invisible companions. Nathan suspected she occasionally chatted with Sophie, though Eliza never said it outright. The scene before him, the vibrant yard, the absorbed little girl, the cozy house behind, filled Nathan with a sense of wholeness he never thought possible after Sophie's death. This wasn't the same happiness he once knew. It would never be exactly that again. It was something else, deeper, more aware of its own fragility. A joy that carried the memory of pain, but chose each day to move forward despite it. The house now breathed. Each room had reclaimed its true purpose, to shelter life, not just preserve memories. The sounds of Eliza, her footsteps, her laughter, even her occasional outbursts, had banished the oppressive silence. Colors had returned too. During his year of mourning, Nathan had been nearly colorblind, seeing the world in gray. Now he saw the flowers in the garden, Eliza's vibrant drawings on the fridge, the golden light of late afternoons on the living room walls. And the smells. The smell of fresh bread soon to fill the kitchen, the aroma of cookies they baked together on Sundays, the scent of flowers that Eliza insisted on picking and placing in small vases around the house, even the earthy smell of grass clinging to her clothes when she came in from playing. From his chair on the porch, Nathan watched Eliza abandon her stone project to chase a particularly large butterfly. Her laughter, carried by the gentle breeze, reached him like a melody. The past was still there, Sophie was still there, in every corner and every memory. But now she existed peacefully alongside the new reality they had created. No longer a painful ghost, but a gentle presence, part of this family's story. The present was an embrace, literal hugs from Eliza, which came more often and more freely now, and the figurative embrace of the life they were building, wrapping them in safety and belonging. "Dad, come see what I found," Eliza called from the middle of the yard, holding something small in her hands with great excitement. Nathan stood, smiling. Even this simple act, being called, responding, joining, was a gift he no longer took for granted. Love doesn't replace, he thought, as he walked across the grass toward his daughter. But it knows how to begin anew. Nathan healed his grief. Eliza healed her loneliness. Together, they created what neither had alone, a home. Their story didn't start perfectly. It was born of loss, absence, and abandonment. But what they built out of those broken fragments was something new and precious. A family united not only by blood, but by choice, perseverance, and a love determined to flourish in even the unlikeliest soil. In the house that once echoed only with silence, there were now laughter, conversations, and even the occasional argument. Every room and every corner held both old and new memories, woven into a complex tapestry. Nathan learned that a heart can expand even after being shattered. Eliza discovered that belonging is possible, even after a lifetime spent feeling uprooted. And Sophie, in some way, remained, no longer a source of painful absence, but a guiding light that had brought two lonely souls back together. completing a circle begun long before that stormy night. The house, now truly alive, stood not as a mausoleum of frozen memories but as